Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on Time's flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, with me today to share how we can transform our relationship with our body, mind, and emotions and alleviate pain, insomnia, depression, and numerous other ailments by learning to think electrically is pioneering researcher in sound healing therapy, Eileen Day McKusick, MA, who spent more than 20 years exploring and mapping the human biofield and is the award-winning author of the books Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body, Electric Health. Eileen McKusick, welcome.
Hi, Sandy.
So you've your book, Tuning the Human Biofield, won the Nautilus Award. It's based on your master's thesis, exploring the effects of audible sound on the human body. Where did your journey with sound begin?
My journey with sound began in 1996 when I found a set of tuning forks for healing in a Gaia catalog. And at the time I was doing massage therapy, just part-time, and I decided to get them and start experimenting with them. And almost 29 years later, I'm still experimenting with them.
So what was your first experience with them?
Well, the tuning forks really surprised me. And actually, I would say that they continue to surprise me, which is part of the reason why I've still been using them. I like to be surprised, I guess. And so I remember very distinctly one of my massage clients, one of the first people that I used them with. Now, I had no idea what I was doing. They came with very simple instructions. It was the C major scale as related to the chakras, and said use C on the root, D on the sacral, E on the solar, and so on. So I just started activating them and moving them around people's bodies. And I had a gentleman who came to see me because he had a very sore shoulder. And I asked him if he was willing to be a guinea pig. And I held the tuning fork over his shoulder and the tone went very sharp. And then I held it over his other shoulder and it sounded normal. And so I went back to the sore shoulder and I kept activating the fork and holding it over that shoulder until finally, after just a little bit, it sounded like the other shoulder. And then he got up off the table and he rotated his arm and he said, "Oh my God, Eileen, all the pain is gone." And we were both very surprised about that because neither one of us had any expectation. So that intrigued me. And with each person that came in that was willing to be experimented on, I kept making more and more discoveries about how the sound was interacting with the body.
Who first invented the tuning forks? I mean, sound has been used for healing for millennia, with musical instruments, drums and didgeridoos and things like that. But who actually invented the forks?
Well, I believe tuning forks used to tune instruments were invented allegedly in the 1700s. Although apparently there have been things that are tuning fork-like discovered in ancient Egypt. So who knows how long they've really been around. However, there are three gentlemen in the 70s and 80s, Fabian Maman, Jonathan Goldman, and John Beaulieu. All were using tuning forks before I got a hold of them. And they have all developed their own approaches with them.
Mm. Wow. So you discovered that the human biofield contains a very specific anatomy and physiology, which can be successfully modulated with them. How did you discover that? Was it just by observation, practicing with different clients and seeing the difference it made?
Yeah, it was really kind of a blind fumble in the dark with momentary flashes of illumination that started to reveal patterns. So it was really kind of a process of pattern recognition over the course of a number of years when I discovered that, just like our inside anatomy is pretty much the same from person to person, that the atmosphere around the body actually had anatomy and physiology. It's like this terrain kind of hidden in plain view. And I was using the tuning forks like echolocation, bouncing sound off the body. And then after 10 years of doing that, I accidentally discovered that there was stuff going on in the atmosphere around the body. And so it was really a process of sounding into and then listening to the pingback, just like ultrasound gives us a picture of what we cannot see. The tuning forks kind of revealed the same thing, the texture and patterning in the field around the body. And this led to what I call the biofield anatomy map.
So how did you actually create that? Was that, again, through observation and just noticing if this person's got this kind of problem, and if I press there, this is what's going to happen?
Yeah. It was, just sort of something like I had a lot of people who would come in and they would have right hip pain. And I discovered that they had a lot of charge or energy, sense of resistance in the fork, and a change in tone in the magnetic field around that particular area. And I discovered somewhat oddly that I could move these areas of charge in the magnetic field with the tuning fork, that the tuning fork became like a magnetic stylus in my hand, and I could do magnetic field adjustments that would lead to a change in the way electricity was flowing through the body. And I also found that each area of pain that people had, there seemed to be an associated mental emotional imbalance that was informing it. So, for example, very often people with right hip issues, sciatica, right hip pain, have a tendency to overdo and overthink, to project themselves into the future, to run to-do lists, to have sort of an inner taskmaster. And so they're not resting in the present moment. They're pushing themselves out in front of themselves in this kind of busy way. And when our magnetic field, our mind, our emotions go out of balance, it pulls the body with it. And so I discovered that I could, in adjusting the magnetic field, it was sort of like adjusting someone's mind. And then I would give them some coaching around the importance of staying in the present moment, checking their thoughts when they had a twinge or a flare up, like what was your mind doing? And then bringing themselves back into the now. And found that was an extremely effective way for helping people not only get out of pain or discomfort, but connect to their own bad habits that were leading to that in the first place.
Have you found, shiatsu, quite often, a practitioner can press on a certain area and somebody just dissolves into tears. Have you found the same thing happening with the tuning forks?
Mm-hmm. In fact, I've talked about getting a T-shirt made that says "I make people cry," because I'm very good. Essentially, what I discovered that the biofield is, or the body's biomagnetic field, is what we would call our mind. It's our conscious mind. It's our subconscious mind. It's where all our memories are stored. We're all told that our memories in the brain, and they might be there, but I found them in this very specific way in the magnetic field. And part of the biofield mapping, the left shoulder, for example, every time we feel sad, we are laying those memories of those sad feelings off of the left shoulder. So if I am combing through someone's field, I can find through the way the fork changes, the resistance that I feel in my fingertips, specific sad memories, and I can determine what age they are, because the field is it's stratified and it's timelined. So as we generate information in each moment, we're sort of laying down these tracks within our field, and information moves away from us. So our field is about 6 feet. It extends 6 feet out from our body on average. And information I find close to the body is current or recently generated. Information I found at the outer boundary of the field, and it is a bubble, like there is a membrane there that we can feel. That membrane contains information from gestation, then birth. So when I start 6 feet away from your body and start moving the vibrating tuning fork through your field, it's literally like dropping a needle on an album and reading the vibrational record of your life. And so any place where there's highs or lows, the tuning fork is going to reflect that. So I can find these undigested, unexpressed memories, like poking around your brain almost. And I can find the tender places. And when you start manipulating those, energizing those, it'll bring the emotion up. So I definitely make people cry a lot. One of our slogans is better out than in. So
Yeah.
it's a welcome thing.
Yeah. Tuning forks, they're set to different frequencies. How does somebody create a specific frequency with the tuning fork? What are they doing? Is it, in the metal? Is it in, the weight of the metal or something?
It actually has to do with the length of the fork. So the higher the frequency, the shorter the fork. The lower the frequency, the longer the fork. It's very specifically related to length, and then how many cycles per second it makes. So that's hertz. So different frequencies are used for different approaches.
You, in your book, you talk about Dr. Tennant, who created the biomodulator, an ophthalmologist, homeopath, and alternative medicine practitioner. And his book was called Healing is Voltage. Well, voltage, electricity, there's a big, connection there. So what did you think about his work? I mean, he talks about pH balance a lot and the pH balance in the cells. Have you done any research with that?
Well, I think his work has really informed mine and my understanding of our body's electrical system, which is something none of us learn about. Most of us recognize that our heartbeat is electric, or that our brain is electric, blood carries a charge, nervous system. So we see the parts and pieces, but nobody ever really speaks to the whole electrical system in its entirety, the current that runs through our body and the magnetic field that's around it. And so his work, and especially his recognition that what we call pH also relates to voltage, and that the body has an optimum voltage range. And when that drops, like when the pH drops and goes into acidity, that's low voltage, and how we need to have a certain amount of charge across all our cell membranes in order for everything to function properly. So he really helped me make this switch from chemical speak to electric speak, and looking at the body through an electric health lens as opposed to the chemical mechanical lens that we've all been conditioned to look through.
So can you actually measure the voltage when you're using tuning forks?
Well, that's an interesting question. There are certainly devices out there. Jerry makes a device, and there are other devices. I'm very much an acoustic low-tech gal. And I did get some gadgets and heart rate variability and, different things to measure before and after. But at the end of the day, what I really found is that our human instruments are the most sensitive instruments. And I get much more out of my own observation and listening to and looking at someone else's response and observation. So even though things like this can be measured, at the end of the day, in the final analysis, I kind of found it to be a waste of time.
Do you ever work on children or babies?
Absolutely. Yeah, we absolutely work on children. And I'm going to be a grandmother in the spring. So I will definitely be working on a baby, exploring all the different ways that one can gently support a baby with sound. With kids, with animals, it's always less is more. An adult can sit through a 60-minute session, no problem. But with kids, we always want to make sure we hand them the tools. Kids and animals are the same way. Adults don't care about the tools. They don't care about what you're doing. But kids and animals want to sniff and smell and hold and have a real solid understanding of what is taking place before you start working with them.
So you must, if you're working on a very young child or an animal, you must have to rely on your intuition a lot because you're not necessarily going to get obvious feedback.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you can connect with an animal. It's a way for anybody, really, I think, maybe not anybody, anybody who's interested and who cares and is curious, uh, to do like animal communication. When I tap into the field of an animal, and I can do this work at a distance as well, I can see and sense and hear very clearly what it is they're struggling with. It just comes through.
Do you find that, if you're working with someone who's got a lot of pain, you can get an instant feedback, if it changes the pain. If you're working with someone insomnia, then you've got to wait for feedback. Do you find that, different clients report different things and that it is easier to work with someone when you're getting instant feedback?
Well, everybody's different, right? I think this is one of the great big lessons for me in this work is everyone is different. Every session with everyone is different. You never really know how things are going to land. Like most approaches, it's great for many things, but isn't an end all be all fix all for everything. I would say at a very fundamental level, what my work with the tuning forks does is it relaxes subconscious tension that people are holding. And I've really come to the conclusion that just about every ailment that we can suffer from is a consequence of some kind of pattern of tension in the body that's stopping the body from being able to fix itself like it's designed to do. Insomnia is just a kind of tension and rhythms that are running too high and too fast. And so we find where those rhythms are in the body, provide the body with feedback of that. So the tuning fork acts like a mirror through the physics principles of resonance and entrainment. That's how I find areas in the field where the signal might be out of whack. And I'll just stay in that area and reflect it back to the body and say, hey, body, look, you're kind of out of tune over here. So just like when we see ourselves in a mirror, maybe if we haven't in a while and our hair is a mess and we have seed in our teeth, our first instinct is to bring ourselves back into order. It's the exact same with your organizing intelligence. When you reflect to the body a place that it's out of order, it will use that reflection, that steady rhythm, that steady tone to bring itself back into order and relax.
So this new baby, has it occurred to you to, I don't know, is it your son or your daughter that's having the child?
It's my son and his girlfriend.
Oh, okay. So have you asked his girlfriend whether you could be there at the birth and use your forks to support her?
Yeah, I think that we haven't quite gotten there yet because it's a little ways off. But I have heard stories of other biofield tuning practitioners who absolutely have done that. And so it's definitely in the realm of possibility.
So what is the most unusual use of tuning forks that you've come across?
The most unusual. That's a good question. Well, what's coming to mind is I recently saw a video of one of our practitioners working with horses. And I do think that the fact that they work so well with animals really shows us that it's not just the placebo effect. That we've heard many, many remarkable stories about dogs no longer being afraid of thunder, about cats becoming more social, about horses that were creating problems in the herd no longer doing that. So I think that really shows us that the sound is working in this very objective way.
I mean, sound is such a, well, there are no words to describe, how fantastic sound is, and we've barely tapped the surface of understanding what it can do. I mean, the frequency, the vibration, etc. Listening to one of your little sessions on a free video with the Shift Network, I noticed as you were using, that tone, my whole body was resonating with it. I could feel my body, the shivers and the hair on my arms standing on end. I mean, it's just astonishing that sound can do that. It can also be very dangerous as well. I mean, there's talk of sound being used as a weapon for war.
Yeah. When I was doing research for my master's thesis back in 2010 and 11, I was really surprised at the lack of research on therapeutic sound. Certainly, there was plenty about music, but when it came to sound frequencies, to audible sound frequencies, there was very, very little. And I realized in hindsight that a lot of the research on sound and frequencies had been being done by DARPA and the Department of Defense in order to use them for evil instead of for good. Like you said, there's a lot of sound weapons, frequency weapons, and a kind of hiding the power of sound and frequency from us, or getting it in people's heads that it's pseudoscientific or woo-woo in some way. So we just dismiss it.
Yeah. I mean, we all know the famous one, an opera singer's voice can shatter a glass. I remember reading many years ago about somebody who had noticed they got a headache in their attic room, a French guy, I think it was, and he put his ear to the wall and he could hear this hum. And then after that, he started doing experiments with sound because that it can actually give you a headache is quite something.
And it can take it away too.
And it can take it away. Yeah. And
wow.
That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, there's good and I first came across, and got fascinated by sound reading about Jeffrey Thompson's work 25 years ago. And the thought that, he could, play these sounds on a therapy bed and somebody's body, the bones could actually start moving was just, wow, that was mind-boggling. What else do you think we could use it for?
Well, there's so many technologies being discovered at the moment. Like we were speaking before off camera about how they figured out how to use it to shatter cancer cells, for example. And that's something that was being done by Royal Raymond Rife back in the 30s and 40s. So it isn't new. I think there's really no end to what can be done with sound, honestly. I think it is the beginning of a new frontier, and there is still very much to discover. There's lots of devices out there, frequency devices, but I've found that I can accomplish an awful lot with just my low-tech tuning forks, and don't need $30,000 machines that read your vibe and send you vibes, because we can do so much with simple tools. We can also accomplish a huge amount with just our own voices.
Yes, and that's something that Jonathan Goldman talks about a lot, and humming. We can hum to ourselves, and I've actually sung to my body in the past when I've had a pain or something, and it really does work.
Yeah, I like to say that the most powerful thing in the universe is right under our nose, and it's our mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that different sounds and tones, is there a kind of, people who speak English as opposed to people who are brought up speaking German, that there's a difference, that they would have different notes that would respond, that they would respond to simply because the way that they have been taught to use sound in their language?
That's a really great question, and something that I'm not sure that I've taken the time to observe. But certainly the English language is sort of square and clunky. And even the way that it's written, I think that it is not really a language of sound healing and of beauty. And there are plenty of other languages that might be more therapeutic to speak and sing in than English. But that's something that would be a rabbit hole yet to be gone down.
Yeah, I mean, we all respond favorably to, say, a French accent, which always sounds incredibly romantic. And there's the beautiful sing-song accents of Chinese and Japanese people. And then you've got the German guttural sounds, which are not quite so attractive. So I would think that the people who are born listening to some of those sounds would have some challenge listening to different ones.
Yeah, I would think so. I think that that's something worth exploring for sure.
What sort of research are you engaged in now? I mean, you've been researching, you said, for 30 years or more. What are you doing now?
Well, currently we have a couple things going on. I have a nonprofit institute called the Biofield Tuning Institute, and we conduct grant-funded, peer-reviewed research on the biofield and the biofield tuning approach. We just completed year 2 of a 3-year study with 100 volunteers. We had 65 of those volunteers receive 5 biofield tuning sessions over Zoom, 1-hour sessions once a week. And then we had a control group of 35 people who did not receive sessions, but answered the same questionnaires each week. And this is a follow-up to a feasibility study that we did and had published a couple of years ago, where everybody who came into the study had clinical anxiety and everybody who left the study no longer did. So we wanted to see, okay, that was 15 people receiving 3 sessions. What happens with 65 people who receive 5 sessions? And so we are in the process of collating that data now. We'll be writing it up for peer review in the first half of next year. So this is exciting because tuning forks and energy fields sounds out there, and having peer-reviewed research with very solid evidence of decline and in some cases complete removal of people's symptoms of anxiety it has been necessary, but also exciting to see.
So how does the medical establishment relate to this? Because, you could be taking a lot of business away from them.
Well, I find it very interesting that Western medicine is starting to grasp electricity in the body. What they're really still missing is the magnetic field aspect. Again, we've been conditioned to think of things like auras or human energy fields as nonsense and something that doesn't exist. But we all learned in grade school that anything that has electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And the human body is no different. I will say that this work does, I can't tell you how many times I've had people say to me, I got more out of 3 sessions with you than I did in years of therapy. Because we're able to go right into the memory and modulate it, relax it, release the charge from it, release the tension from the body. It helps people to drop their pain stories and start to tell themselves a new story. We've gotten people off anxiety meds, thyroid meds, depression meds. We've had people not have to get surgery from our interventions. So it is a disruptive technology. And there is resistance to this new paradigm. But at the end of the day, the market drives it. And more people are discovering just how powerful and effective sound healing can be.
Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest today is pioneering researcher, inventor, practitioner, and educator in the fields of therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health, Eileen McKusick. And we're discussing the valuable information shared in her best-selling books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body, Electric Health. We'll be back with more from Eileen McKusick in a few moments. And also, you can have an example of what the sound does to your body. Stay tuned.
Om Times TV.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi. And the siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Eileen McKusick. I can recall hearing some years ago that if there are certain notes that we individually resonate with, it's almost like a complete match for ourselves, if you like. And when you hear them, the hair on the back of your neck will stand up. Now, I've had that experience with one particular singer, and, is it true? Is it true that that is a note that is specific to me?
We don't know that it's necessarily as simple as the note, right? Because a singer it's his or her whole vibe. It is that we are collections of many, many frequencies, and some people resonate us more than others, some collections of sounds. But, we can play with Gene Forks. I've got a handful here. So we could actually test that question and see if any one of the 5 frequencies I have handy resonates with you more.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure how the sound system is. Sometimes people don't always get all the sound through, or it might cut it off a little bit. So let me just do a test, Sandy, and you let me know how this sounds for you. So this fork is 174 hertz. This is my primary field combing fork, and I've used lots of different frequencies. I've had lots of different prototypes made, really worked with quite a lot of different forks. And I found, for me, this one is the most useful for the field combing process, because its overtones and undertones really morph in such a way that when I get into, say, a sad memory, the sound coming out of the fork will sound sad. When I get into an area holding anger, you can feel the anger in it. It's like our bodies are always making inaudible music, and the tuning fork overtones and undertones actually makes that music that we're making audible, which is kind of wild. Okay, so let's just listen to a few of these as a sound check, but also to see what you notice. Can you hear that okay? All right, good. All right, so I'll just activate it a few times and then you just see what you notice.
I noticed my breathing changed.
I felt that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got a little wider, right?
Yeah. Almost and a little bit faster and deeper.
Yep, deeper. Right, because it's going to show you in your body where you're holding tension and then immediately start to work to release that tension. And I would say at the end of the day, so much of our health is related to our breath and how full and free and light and grateful and easy our breath is. Because most of our life force in the electric health model comes from breath. You go weeks without food, days without liquid. You can only go a few minutes without breath. And that's because we are breathing in a plasma or electrified atmosphere. Why blood becomes bright red is because it has light in it. And it's that light, that electric light that's getting dropped off at your cells. When we talk about Jerry Tennant's, you need a certain amount of charge across your cell membrane. Most of that charge is coming from your breath. So anything that we do to relax tension that's constricting the breath is helping our inner battery to get stronger. Yeah. So that's the 174. And then here's the 144. This is another fork that I used for field combing. It's a little more dramatic than the other one. So let's see what we notice with this one. One more with this one because it wants to do just a little bit more work. Good. What do you notice with that one, Sandy?
It's difficult to articulate, but it almost as if I felt something loosening. That's the only way I can describe it. I can't pinpoint it.
Yeah. I think that what I found, I created the 144 during COVID because what I found was that even if people, they themselves weren't in fear, there was so much fear in the collective. And this creates a kind of hunkering down and pulling in and a little shaking. And I was having a hard time getting through that with my 174. I was like, I need a bigger gun. And so I created the 144 with that intention. So it really does resonate with like lockdown fear or lockdown anxiety, a lot of the subconscious stuff that we hold maybe in our gut, in our digestive tract, right? People who have digestive issues, very often emotions that you just stuffed down in there, you're holding them tight. And why you maybe are struggling with your digestion because it's not all like this in there. It's like, and so that feeling like it's getting in there and starting to loosen things. Like I could have sat with that one for another 5 minutes because there's like work that it wanted to do, not just in you, but everyone who will ever listen to this. It's reacting to and working with the collective field. Okay, let's try a different one. We'll try a higher frequency. So this one is 528 hertz. So let's listen to this one. One more.
I can't say that I felt anything happening, but I was very aware of the fact that it seemed to have two tones.
Yes. Yeah, definitely has two tones. So with the tuning forks, we get the overtones, we get the undertones. And sometimes in certain circumstances, certain overtones are accented. So you'll hear kind of a dual tone. But it's always different. And this is why tuning forks have been so intriguing to me, because they really do reflect whatever is going on in any given moment. And it's always different. It really shows so much information. Let me show you one of my newest forks, really, truly one of my favorite forks. This one is 222 hertz. And all my other forks are what I call working forks. They want to get in the field. They want to find what's wrong. They want to help it to sort out. This fork is like the friend that comes over when you're having a bad day. It doesn't try to fix you, just loves you just the way you are. So this is not a working fork so much. It's like a fork of being. It's kind of like a bell. It's a great meditation aid to just sit with, because it brings you into one pointed focus and also informs you with its coherence. It's better than sitting by yourself, just trying to be quiet. So let's listen to that. Good, and we'll do one more. Good.
It's interesting how you can hear it differently in each ear. You know, it's almost like, you know, when you've got stereo and you hear it here and then all of a sudden you hear it over there, and it sounds quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, so speaking of hearing it differently in different ears, you can also combine them and do two at the same time and create a binaural beat. So the combination of the 144 plus the 222 is what we call the peacemakers. This one is, these are all the things that are wrong with you, and I'm going to get them straightened out. And this one is, I love you just the way you are. And using the two together is kind of interesting. So let's just listen to two together. And I'll do one more of those.
So it almost became one note, and I could hear, it sounds a bit stupid, but I could hear part of it behind me and part of it in front of me.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's not stupid, right? It's just your observation. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
to say it's one note, but then, you know, you're hearing two different.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of the binaural beat. So you can pick any two forks and hold them up to your ears and, you know, just listen. And it quiets the mind right away, because I think so many people struggle with busy minds. And so this is such an easy way to quiet the mind and inform your body with coherent energy. It's very simple.
So what about working with people who can't hear?
Well, you know, the thing is that our bodies are mostly water, right? And water responds to vibrational input. So it doesn't matter if you can't hear, because your body's electrical system and the water in your body are absolutely responsive to vibrational inputs.
You know, we forget, don't we, how much. I can remember being in an airport a few years ago, and the noise, you know, the tannoy, the flights being announced, the music, different music in different restaurants blaring out. And I became acutely aware of the noise. And it made me think about how we used to live. You know, people who'd lived on a farm, they never heard that kind of thing. You know, they'd hear the sounds of the animals, maybe the wind, maybe people talking. But, you know, what have we done to ourselves with this overplay of sounds?
Yeah. Leaf blowers, lawnmowers on weekends. And never mind all the sounds that we can't hear. You know, even things like windmills create ultrasonic and infrasonic frequencies that do impact people. So there is a tremendous amount of noise pollution in the world. and it causes stress. Well, I used to own a busy restaurant, and there'd be compressors and dishwashers and customers and cash registers and machines. And then every once in a while, the power would go out, and we would all go, whew, because we didn't realize all the subconscious tension that we were holding against the fluorescent lights and the sounds and the noises. And when it all went away, you're like, ah, right?
Yeah.
So it definitely creates a lot of stress and tension, and it's ubiquitous in the world today.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'll go to the movies and the sound will be so loud that it's painful.
Yeah.
And I have to sit there and close my ears because it hurts. Yeah, there's so much sound that really is unnecessary. And we are being informed by it the whole time.
Absolutely.
How do you teach people to do this? I mean, I know you train practitioners, but is this something that I could do for myself?
You know, it's really interesting. I started teaching my first students back in 2010. And one of my brothers said to me, he's like, can you teach other people to do what you do? Because I'd been doing it for 14 years and I was the only person who was doing it. And I said, well, I don't know. We're about to find out. And I was truly amazed that everyone picked it up relatively quickly, because you don't have to be psychic or really anything. In fact, I call my practitioners technicians, that it's really just your job to comb through the field until you feel a sense of resistance and you feel the vibration change in your fingertips. And then all you have to do is stay there and let the body sort itself out. Once the body has organized itself, released the tension it was holding, then you just move along to the next spot. And if you want to know what the memories are, you can plot them on the biofield anatomy map. And you can say, okay, according to the biofield anatomy map, this memory is around 10 years old and it's in the zone that relates to your mother. and people, if they want to talk about that experience, because they'll, very often remember like, oh, that was when my mother left us, they can talk about it. And all we do is witness. We just provide a container to listen. If they don't want to talk about it, the body still sorts itself out and we're able. So it's really sort of like combing through tangled hair, that very often our wiring just kind of ends up tangled, and that causes our overall voltage to drop because there's so much resistance in the flow of the signal. And so as we help people to relax, their overall voltage goes up. So it is not hard to do. Once you understand what that tension is and what that feeling is, you pick it up right away. It's a very, very simple practice. And people can do it on themselves as well, which is kind of interesting. And the way that we invite people to learn to do it on themselves is the same way that we do this work at a distance. So I know it sounds like tuning fork healing at a distance sounds like ridiculous. I certainly felt that way. People asked me for years if I could do it at a distance. And I always said no, until I tried it and discovered that same pattern of information and energy that shows up around people when they're on my table showed up around an empty table, somewhat amazingly, right? So we can do it that way as well.
So this is something that lends itself as a collaborative therapy in many ways. You could see a psychologist using this to loosen somebody up, and it's great to be able to say, well, what about your mother? There's something coming up here, and just be able to guide people. And it would be great in kinesiology as well.
Yeah, what's beautiful about this approach is that it links with all different kinds of therapies really well. We have doctors, holistic nurses, chiropractors, osteopaths, psychotherapists, counselors, coaches, massage therapists. Really, many people can figure out a way to take this approach and blend it into what they're already doing. It's very versatile.
Very versatile. I noticed on your website that you've got a lot of free audio downloads for different ailments. How are you creating those? Is it from the body map that you've worked out there's particular tones that the thyroid or the hip or the spine resonates with?
It's not so much about the tones. I know people are often looking for magic frequencies that will fix this. What's the frequency for depression? In our model, it doesn't really work that way. We know where the area in the biofield is that when someone is depressed, that energy piles up. It's off the left shoulder. And so and it's like almost like, heavy clouds. When we talk about wet blankets or being under the weather, it's like a low pressure system in our atmosphere sitting there, and we'll come in and bust that area up and get energy moving. So it's not giving us that feeling. So there may be magical frequencies that do magical things, but that's not how our work works. We really do work with the map and locating tonal patterns in specific areas. I might pull out the 174 first, and then maybe some 144, and then a little 528. So, I'm mixing it up based on what I'm encountering. So some of those are a consequence of me field combing through a hologram and doing an adjustment that way. Some are just me tuning in and listening. Like there's a couple sessions on the mitochondria. And in those, all I'm doing is tuning into the mitochondria in my mind's eye and just activating the fork over and over again in relationship to what is going on there. So they're all a little bit different. We have a very big library of all different kinds of things that are interesting. Like we have a psoas release series, and the psoas muscle goes from the low back through the hips to the top of the thigh. Very often is a muscle that's short and tight and difficult to stretch. And you listen to these 3 1-hour recordings and your whole psoas muscles just kind of melt and elongate and soften. Kind of odd, but very helpful. Another series we have is an adrenal reset series, because a lot of people have adrenal exhaustion. And that's one of me combing through the field of the hologram, finding the adrenal rhythm that's too high and too fast, and inviting it to become self-aware and reset itself. So it's a very different approach than like going to a holistic doctor and getting a whole bunch of supplements pushed at you. Because ultimately, everything in your body is rhythmic. And if everything is at its right rhythm and working well together, then you're going to experience regulation and health. But many of us have things are too fast, too high, too low, too slow. But we're all designed to be in harmony. That's our factory setting. And humans ultimately are self-tuning instruments. And all we have to do is have a reflection of where we're out of tune and something to support us getting back in, and the body goes there, which is really kind of amazing.
Do you ever use other instruments, or is it only tuning forks?
I use voice as well. I use voice, and I encourage people to use their voice. Like if I'm working with someone who has heavy energy in their heart, I might take a weighted tuning fork like this. I know your listeners can't see it, but it's a tuning fork that has barrels on the end. And what those do is they drive the sound into the body. So I might put a weighted fork on somebody's sternum and invite them to make the sound ya and up and through the tuning fork for the purpose of opening and relaxing and releasing the heart and lifting that heavy energy off. So the combination of the voice from within and the tuning forks from without really helps to open and release and relax in a beautiful way.
I've noticed that people don't whistle anymore. People used to whistle in the street when they were happy, or they'd be singing to themselves. We don't tend to. It's funny because we make a lot of noise in public talking on our phone when we think nobody around us is listening and everybody can hear, but we don't allow ourselves to make noises that actually benefit us and those around us.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's for a number of reasons. I think a lot of people have very overactive minds. And I think a lot of people don't have the free and easy spirit that gives rise to whistling, that gives rise to humming. We're fairly embattled, embittered, and stressed in our culture. And something as simple as humming can be very helpful. In the model that I work with called the sonic anatomy, humming is resonates the bones. And so you can take a hum and move it all around in your body and resonate your bones, and that will increase your energy level. And it's so simple and so easy.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time now. Have you got any courses coming up?
Have I got courses coming up? Well, I have sort of ongoing courses with biofield tuning certification. We have a 2-part certification program. If people are interested in learning more about that, I teach a course called Sing the Body Electric, where we explore the 42 different tones of the sonic anatomy. That's at singthebodyelectric.com. You can learn about that. And I go to a lot of different events during the year. So you can check out my events page at biofieldtuning.com and see what else is coming up.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Eileen. It's been a really instructive.
Nice. Thank you so much, Sandy. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
So, Electric Body, Electric Health by Eileen McKusick is published by St. Martin's Essentials. And for more information about her books, events, sound therapy sessions, both free and those that are available for purchase, you can visit her website at biofieldtuning.com. And what was the other one? Sing Your Body Electric?
Sing the Body Electric.
Thebodyelectric.com. I'll check that one out. That's it for this week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you, Eileen McKusick.